Welcome to Kitchen Table Life with Nancy and Charity, a podcast where friends gather to spill the coffee. We talk practical truth about life's challenges, loving well, and leading strong.
Come on, friends, and gather round.
Have you ever known the ache of loss? That kind of grief that feels impossible to carry alone? Well, let's talk about it.
Hello,
You know,
everyone. Hello, Nancy. Hello, world.
there's a lot going on in our world right now. And this is a needed, but I think a heavy topic when we talk about grief and gratitude. They seem like polar opposites, but really they create a healthy balance in us.
And I think that's
Uh,
something that we need in all areas of life, Nancy, like balance, and
yeah.
especially when we're going through something.
Yeah, and I think grief comes in different forms. You and I talked about this kind of in show prep that it's not always the loss of a person. Sometimes it could be the loss of a season, the loss of a job. I know that we've got parents that are sending kids off to college here in a few months. And, and that's going to be a whole nother season. And sometimes there's a grief that comes with that. Sometimes it's the grief of a loss of a friendship.
Yeah.
Seasons have changed on a friendship, and so there's grief because of that. But I remember a time very recently where I actually lost four people in the span of just a few weeks. And they were all varying degrees of closeness to me.
Hmm.
Um, but it had a significant impact in my life. And then there was another individual during the same season who I didn't know personally, but just kind of followed, somebody you watch from afar, and they passed. And it was the season went beyond what I feel like is a normal sadness, and it was like a grief in my spirit. Like it affected me physically, mentally. I mean, it impacted everything that I did.
Well, isn't that what grief does? It kind of wraps its arms around us, really. You know.
I think of it more of a boa constrictor.
Oh, well, I was thinking of like in the Old Testament where it talks about, for instance, Job, and all the bad stuff happened, and he put on rags. He like
Yeah,
wrapped himself in rags. He wrapped himself in his grief.
yeah.
It's kind of like the image I get when I think of grief. Like it's there and it covers you, and it's like I'm wearing it, you know.
And sometimes it feels like there's no escape.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the truth. It feels like it doesn't matter where you go. It's like grief follows you to the bathroom. It
Yeah.
follows you into the car, into the drop-off line with your kids. It follows you to work. It follows you in every relationship. But one thing that I learned from that season of those few weeks is that I have to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
Life still has to go on, ministry still has to take place. It doesn't mean that I can't recognize my grief, but I can't stop and sit in my grief. There's a moment, right? There's a time to have that sadness and to walk through that, but to wallow and to wade into the depths of your grief. So when you stay there, it becomes costly, I feel like.
Well, it's like I relate it to the idea of being on the struggle bus. You're
Yeah.
going through something, you're on the struggle bus, and you're processing things, and that struggle bus is moving along. And the goal is to be able to get off the struggle bus. You can't live on the struggle bus. It's not an RV, it's temporary transportation. So,
Wait a minute. I love
yeah,
that. Say that again. So grief is not, go
an
say it again.
RV. It's not
It's
an
not
RV.
an RV.
You can't live there. You know,
That's
it
good.
it's the struggle bus. It's temporary transportation. It's necessary transportation because we need to
Yeah.
deal with things and process things. So there's nothing wrong with processing grief. And everyone deals with grief differently and
Right.
for varying things. Loss of a loved one, loss of a child, loss of a dream, like you were saying,
Hmm.
loss of a job. Um, so
Plans that didn't work out the way you had hoped.
yeah,
Yeah.
unfulfilled expectations.
Yeah.
Or
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes when we grieve, it's very easy to fall into that trap of depression. And I'm not talking clinical, I'm just talking about that like depression, self-loathing. I think you mentioned earlier, even apathy
Mm-hmm.
and anger. But we can't give up just because we're grieved. But we can't ignore it either, right? There's that happy medium. We've got to recognize it, process it, and continue to move forward. And I know that sounds a little cold and calculated. It's not like, okay, the whatever happened happened on a Monday. So on Tuesday you recognize it, Wednesday you process it, and then Thursday you go ahead and move forward. It's messy. They're all in there together. But I feel like I really I can't tell you how much I love that analogy. It's not an RV. We're not traveling around the US and we're not meant to stay in it. It's meant to be temporary and being in our grief should be temporary. Now here's the deal though, right? You can move on from grief and 6 months later have it rear its ugly head and almost
Mm-hmm.
punch you in the face.
Oh yeah.
But I think we recycle the same thing. We recognize it, we process it, and we move forward. You know, every emotion we have, God gave us,
Yeah.
including grief.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus even grieved, and we're going to talk about that a little later. So it's not anything that we shouldn't experience, but we're not designed to live in it.
Right. Well,
It's not a fruit of the spirit.
no, no, no. And I wish I would have thought of this verse when we were preparing today. But the one about you will have trial and tribulation, but
Yeah,
don't, and I'm terrible paraphrase here, but don't be overcome. I've overcome the world.
yeah.
Doesn't say that you won't experience bad things or uncomfortable things or things that bring you grief. It's just saying I'm with you through it.
Well, and I think too, as people who are on the outside of the grief,
Hmm.
you have to give space.
Hmm.
And I can tell you, I have a very good friend of mine who experienced a loss, and I knew she was angry. I knew she was angry. I knew she was sad. And I was like, okay. So I told her, I said, I'm going to come over and visit, and we'll just sit and we'll do whatever you want. You can scream, you can cry, we can watch a movie, we can sit there and not talk to each other. I don't care. Whatever you want to do. So, but I came armed. I came armed with snacks. I came armed with a brand new fuzzy blanket because, listen, I always think a new blanket is like a warm hug, no
Oh,
matter who you are, right? So that's kind of my thing. Whether I make them or buy them, if people are going through things, I'm like, you need a blanket, especially if I can't be there, right?
yeah.
Actually, I think I sent you a blanket not too long ago.
You did.
I did.
And I love it. You took
So
it to work with me.
but you know what I also brought with me, and this is going to sound funny, is I brought focus mitts with me. And focus mitts, if you've ever done martial arts, they're these giant thick gloves, or they're about 3 inches thick, and you put them on like gloves, and people hit them. It's how
Okay.
you practice martial arts. And so I was like, you know, I brought all this stuff, but I brought these focus mitts. And so if you need a minute to just hit something and
Oh.
be mad at the enemy for coming and messing with your life, and she's like, "Oh no. I feel like I've processed the anger part. I'm good. I've gotten past that stage of grief. It's okay." And so we went on and I said, "Are you sure you don't want to hit something?" She goes, "No, no." I said, "Okay." So before I left, I said, "Okay, last chance," because I'm leaving. You know, I'd been there for several hours. And I said, "I'll tell you what I'll do. Why don't I put them on and you just hit once or twice. And if you want to stop, I'll put them up. But if you want to keep going, let's do it." And so I put those suckers on and she got two out and then she started yelling. She started yelling at the enemy. She started, you know, really just like casting him down and cursing him for what had happened.
Mm.
And not like cursing as in
Right.
swearing, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And she went on for probably 5 or 6 minutes until I mean it'll wear you out. And so and she was like, "I did not know that was still in there, but I
Oh.
needed that." And so I think as a friend, you try to be prepared the best way you can, or as a loved one or whatever. But we have to be prepared with some natural things, right?
Hmm.
Because it's very real, but also some scriptural things. And I know you said that you like to give yourself pep talks.
Oh yeah, I'm a big, big pep talker. Um, And side note, today at work, actually, I was walking down the little hallway with a whole bunch of cubicles, and I waved at a friend. And they looked at me and they waved back and they said, "You are always happy." And so then I walked over there and I said, "Well, I work really hard at it." And they're like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Because if you see me and I'm crying, I'm sad, you're gonna feel sad.
Yeah.
You know? Like, I'm just letting you know that if I'm crying, then you better bring me that whole box of tissues because something bad has happened."
Yeah.
And, but I'm a person, so I know how to give people pep talks and I know how to give myself pep talks.
Yeah.
And I've actually looked at myself in a mirror, like a full length mirror, and like grabbed the sides of the mirror like I was another person, like grabbing someone's shoulders. And I was like, "You're gonna make it. You can
Yeah.
do this. It will not be like this forever." And,
Yeah.
but I also love songs. They're like pep talks. And there's one I really like, and it's by Brandon Lake, and the title's Gratitude. And
I
it's,
love that song
yeah,
like so much.
it's like, "Come on, my soul," and you're like pepping yourself. I'm like, "Come on, you gotta let this fill my lungs,"
Well,
and the whole thing. And
and it starts off kind of slow, like it's kind of gently lulling you in, and then it
Mhm.
moves into this anthem. And I love that. For those of you listening that don't know, Charity and I did radio together for a number of years and really enjoyed it. It's where we never thought we'd be. I mean,
Right.
Charity had done some in high school, but you couldn't have for $1 million gotten us to guess that we'd have ever been there in this season and this time for that purpose. But God really did some amazing things there. But we both have a love for music.
We do.
And this song by Brandon Lake I love, but really it's whatever song you need. Like if you need to put the Rocky Fight song on to get through your day, man, do it. Do it. God's not mad. He loves Rocky too. You know what I'm saying?
So I guess our struggle bus has, background music playing,
Right.
right?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, and I love because I know you love old hymns,
Yeah.
and um, one of my favorites is "It Is Well with My Soul."
Mm-hmm.
And many people don't know the story behind that hymn. And this gentleman had lost his wife and his daughters. They had been lost at sea.
Mm-hmm.
And when he was taking the ship back across, they stopped where they had died or where they had presumed to have died.
Right.
And he wrote that song, "It Is Well with My Soul." And it goes on to basically say, whatever's going on in life, it's well with my soul. And he's really talking about his relationship with the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that is the thing that we as believers have that the rest of the world is missing. Because I don't know how I would have survived 4 deaths in 2 weeks. Well, I guess it was five, and still been able to walk straight had I not had Christ.
Right.
And the hope of what eternity can bring. And knowing too that our Savior had the same experiences we have had with grief and sadness. In John 11, there's a section in 32 to 36, and I'm just going to paraphrase some of this, but he's coming to Lazarus. His buddy Lazarus has died.
Mm-hmm.
And Lazarus' sister's like, "Lord, if you'd have been here, my brother wouldn't have died." Well, that's actually not reality, right? There's a lot of times that's part of grief is it's like, well, Charity, if you'd have only been here, this wouldn't have happened, or if I'd only been in this time, in this moment. But we don't really know that. But when Jesus, here's what I love, because people will say, the most amazing statement in the whole Bible or whatever. It's also the shortest scripture, and that is Jesus wept
Mm-hmm.
in verse 35. But if you come back beforehand, it says, when he saw her weeping, and the Jews had come with her also weeping. So everybody's sad. It says that he was deeply moved
Mm-hmm.
in his spirit and greatly troubled. And so I think this grief that we feel, like when I say that my spirit was grieved, it was because in many ways we had lost a piece of the people fighting for the kingdom here on earth.
Mm-hmm.
and it almost seemed unnecessary. And so my spirit was grieved. And here in this verse, so is Jesus's.
Yeah.
And when he was taken to him, he wept. Now, for those of you who don't know the rest of the story, Jesus actually went in, prayed over him, and Lazarus was raised from the dead, right? Because he was a miracle working God. But he was also a God here on earth who felt grief.
Yeah.
And that's very real.
And I think one thing a lot of times in the Bible it says, and he had compassion on them.
Mm, yeah.
He had compassion. How much more do we need to show compassion on others who are grieving?
Well, and I think, you and I talked about this a little bit in show prep, is that there is grieving and there is compassion, but you've got to be willing to still have iron sharpening iron, that when you're starting to spiral into a hole, that you're surrounding yourself with people that are going to come pull you out, kick you out, shove you out. You know what I'm saying? That are going to say, you don't get to stay here forever because your purpose did not end where that grief began.
Right. But I think some people forget, like, we have to be so careful and let the Holy Spirit lead us because at first, sometimes we have to
Yes.
sit with our friend and
Yeah.
cry with our friend and pray
Yeah.
with our friend. And then we have to let God lead us and tell us, like, okay, let's move forward. Let's move forward together. You're not in this alone. Of course,
Yeah.
Jesus is, loving us and helping us with this, but that's why he allows us to come alongside our friends. No one, that's why we have Christian community. God didn't
Yeah.
intend for us to do this alone.
Absolutely. And over in First Thessalonians 4:13 to 14, there's an eternal perspective here, right? Because it says, you may not grieve as others do, who do not have hope, who have no hope. For since we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so, through Jesus, God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep. When there is a loss of a person who has accepted Christ, I know it's not easy to rejoice in the fact that they've passed, but when you have grieved the loss of having them here on earth, I don't think there's any better thing than knowing that they're in eternity and
Oh,
you
of
get to
course.
see them again.
Yeah. And so many times oh my gosh, as a Christian, I would hope I would love the idea of eternity, and I do. And but I think of all the times, and of course, when I'm thinking of loss, I'm thinking of like my grandfather that has passed, or someone that was sick that wasn't
Yeah,
healed here on earth, but they've been healed in heaven, kind of thing. And I think of all the wonderful experiences of being able to see them in heaven someday without the cancer, or without the disability, or without the
yeah,
condition, and how just how wonderful that is. Doesn't mean I don't miss them. Doesn't
right.
mean I'm not sad, but I don't live there. I'm allowed to be
Well,
sad.
absolutely. And I think too that we sometimes start to question, like, why weren't they healed here? And that's a whole nother podcast,
Oh
so we're
yeah,
not going to get into that. But I will simply say this, that we don't know the answers
right.
to the why and the when and the how, but we have to trust in the God who says
Yes.
that, he's all knowing and he knows the end from the beginning, and we don't understand the tapestry that he is weaving or the picture he is painting, but our faith says we can trust in him, and that's where we have to rely. And there's several verses that really talk about the position of our heart when
Mhm.
we've experienced grief or loss of any kind. And James 1, 2, and 3 says, count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And this is just one of many examples in the Bible where it talks, because Paul talks about, he talks about having joy too. And Paul's gone through some things. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? They didn't have buses back then, there's charity, but he certainly went from struggle to struggle to struggle. And he still talks about joy. And he talks about what it produces in us. And there is a gratitude that has to come literally from our gut. And the only way that I can explain it to people is we have to practice it when we're not in grief,
Mm-hmm.
so that when grief comes, it can be the catalyst that takes us out. And I think the other important thing for us to note here is that we're not alone.
Right.
Even if you are alone, even if you feel like I don't have any friends, I don't have, whatever, I want to encourage you to get yourself into a body of believers. And don't let this be like, I've met people, they come in and they use church as a place to just like, it's like they come in and vomit
Mm.
all the things. And I understand it comes from a place of hurt, but not everybody needs to know all the details. You know what I'm saying? But getting yourself involved in like a small group, whether it's a
Mhm.
ladies group or a Sunday school, if your church has those, or, some people call them life groups, connect groups, whatever, so that you can have a group of people that will pray for you,
Right.
that will couple with the gratitude that you're practicing, right? And pray you out of where you're at into what's next. Because your gift and your calling and your purpose didn't change because this moment of grief has come. And Psalms 34 tells us that the Lord's near to the brokenhearted and he saves the crushed in spirit. Psalms 147:3 says he heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. And so we have a God that is willing to restore us, not out of just grief, out of so many situations, but he understands that grief is part of our process. There's got to be that gratitude there because I don't know if you feel this way, but grief is exhausting. It's so
Yeah.
exhausting. And because it comes in waves, you can have some good days and then all of a sudden you're back on the bottom again.
Mm-hmm.
But if you haven't built a practice up of how to get out, it's just hard.
Right.
And if you seclude yourself from people, it's even harder. And these are tough words, but it's still a choice.
It is.
You choose to not be near people. You choose not to have praise. And I know that the answer is, well, you don't know how I feel. I don't because I've not gone through your specific thing,
Right.
but I've gone through grief and I've learned enough over time to know that if I stay there, the enemy wins.
Right. And
But God will use it for his glory if I will allow it.
and I think you may have mentioned this already, but James 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah,
Yeah.
count it
Count it
all
all
joy.
joy, my brothers. Yeah. When you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. I guess it warrants being spoken twice.
Yeah. Well, and I think that speaks to the practice of gratitude, right? Of counting
Hmm.
it all joy. And Psalms 100 tells us to enter his gates with thanksgiving, enter his courts with praise, give thanks to him, bless his name. And by the way, it doesn't say when things are good.
Right.
All the verses that talk about giving praise to the Father, it's not like when he did something good for you and you liked how it turned out. For what was it? First Thessalonians 5:16 and through 18, I just read a minute ago, talked about rejoice always, pray without ceasing. We're meant to be in this continual relationship with him, and it's because he wants the best for us. And so
Right.
when we're going through grief, when we're going through trials, he wants to be the one to take us to the next place, but we've got to allow it. I always tell people our Savior loves us so much. He is with you whether you want him to be or not, and he will walk with you straight up to the doors, to the gates of hell, and let you choose to walk in if that's what
Mm.
you want. But what's comforting to me is Revelation 21:4 says, he'll wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away.
I
There's
mean,
hope in the
there,
future.
yeah, there's a lot of hope right there. That's good hope. It doesn't mean that we ignore what is happening right now. It just means that
Right.
God is helping us deal with it. He's wiping away the tears. You know, like the tears are there, but he's removing those tears someday and he can remove them now. We're not saying that we don't want you to feel your feelings. We do.
Yeah.
But we want the Holy Spirit to work in your heart and help you with those feelings so that you don't live there forever.
Well, and even the Old Testament talks to this, and this is, I know, Charity, one of your favorite verses. And I think it warrants just reading the whole thing. I think we're going to go a little long in this particular show, but that's okay. But there's a season for everything under the heavens. And Ecclesiastes 3:1 through 8 says, "For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep." It says there's a time for that. There is a time to weep, but there is a time to laugh. And I'll tell you just a little caveat here. One of my favorite things is when you are in the middle of grief, when when you're celebrating the end of someone's life, not celebrating them, but you do the celebration of life thing, and you get to hear the stories and you get to laugh together. It's like that laughter is a doorway that opens up healing.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I digress. So time to laugh. There is a time to mourn, and there is a time to dance. There is a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to seek and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to cast away. A time to tear and a time to sow. A time to keep silent and a time to speak. And I think you spoke to that earlier.
Right.
A time to love and a time to hate, and a time for war and a time for peace. So there's a time for grief, but there's a time for restoration and renewal as well. So if you are hurting with grief, know this: you are not alone. And we just want to tell you that we're so sorry. We know your pain, but we also know that Christ is near and hope is ahead. So lift your head, pray with gratitude, and trust, my friends, that better days are ahead.
Until next time, be sure to like, share, and follow us on social media.
And keep it real at the kitchen table.